Welcome friends. So, this week in the previous few sessions we have been talking about the different capital budgeting methods one by one, and in this particular session we will see how some of them are used for comparing the projects. We did discuss all of these basic capital budgeting or the renowned capital budgeting approaches one by one. Now, based on, if you recall our earlier sessions, so it was evident that net present value, which is NPV, and internal rate of return, which is IRR, are generally the more robust and more frequently used approaches for purpose of capital budgeting or selecting a project, giving agreement to a project, giving agreement to a funding decision. So, based on these actually the funding decisions are made in a large investment project, and water sector has generally the projects of nature which required substantially large investment often. Now, since the NPV and IRR are the more common method, more common approaches, so let us see how they compare, okay, how they fit in with each other. Now, we will go back to our earlier example, what the one that we considered for Surat Municipal Corporation for say. So, looking at that example again, you know that we have already estimated the different cash flow after taxes, and now if you see we have the final value of cash flow after taxes in the first line itself. Then if we take the different rate of returns, we get the different net present values. So, at a rate of return or a discount rate, what we call 10%, the NPV of the project is of the order of around 46 crore rupees. Then at 14% it is falling down to 28, at 18% around 15, 22% around 5, and 26% it is actually turning negative. So, if my rate of return is 26%, the NPV or net present value of the project is negative, and if my expected return is of the order of 26%, one should not recommend this project or the execution or the investment in this particular project. If you recall, the IRR for this project was somewhere between around 25%. So, that is why, since my rate of return or my discount rate has exceeded IRR, I am getting negative net present value for the project. Okay. And obviously, if it is negative at 26%, it is further going down at 30%. So, now if we see this NPV and IRR that way, this is the plot between the NPV and IRR for between the NPV and rate of return, not IRR actually, between NPV and rate of return for this particular problem. So, you see that as my rate of return is increasing, my net present value is decreasing, and this particular point where NPV profile crosses the horizontal axis of the project, that is what is my internal rate of return. So, this established the typical relationship between NPV and IRR. Okay. This relation is curvilinear because we have considered a compound interest. Okay. If you recall how we estimated how we applied the discount. So, this is my, let us say net cash flow. So, net cash flow 1 upon 1 plus rate of interest in to the power n. So, this is a compound interest, compound discounting. So, if we are doing a discounting like this, we are expected to have a curvilinear nature of this net present value profile. However, if we go on to simple interest or straightway, then this line could actually be straight line also for simple interest. Generally, the discount rate or the the interest rate on the investments are considered a compound interest. So, often this profile will actually be curvilinear in the nature. Now, so far we have been talking about how we can assess a project whether it is profitable or not. What about if we are having multiple projects? So, if you recall, in the beginning of this week we discussed that the projects could be of two different natures. One is independent project, where if there are multiple projects, the projects are independent to each other. If I am selecting a particular project A, it is not hampering, or it does not mean that I cannot select the project B also. So, there is a possibility of selecting more than one project. Each project are independent of each other. Generally, when we have large corpus of budget, then we can actually we can consider more number of projects. For example, you take the that NMCG has, or the Ministry of Ganga Regeneration has substantial amount of fund, and it can invest multiple development projects across the river for the improvement of water quality, for the improvement of river ecology, for the improvement or the possibility of investigating navigation. So, there are possibility of investing in different projects, and if there are substantial budget, so it is not that if the ministry is funding a project to, let us say, analysis or analyze or say the modeling of river water quality from for example, let us say Haridwar to Kanpur. So, it will not fund from Kanpur to Varanasi or from Varanasi to Patna. That is, if ministry has sufficient budgets, it can fund a project for all through different sectors of the river, or let us say it can fund a project onto the river water quality improvement, onto the some money onto the sewage treatment or preventing sewage disposal into the river, some onto the enhancing the flow into the river, some onto the control of the meandering or river channel, some onto the improving ecology of the river. So, there is a possibility of funding into the different sections. These type of projects are independent project. So, for independent project, there is no conflict in decision arises whether we use one technique or another technique, okay, because one project has to be selected. So, whatsoever technique we are choosing, we will see whether it is in agreement to the outcome of that, and if that project gives us, let us say for example, we are choosing NPV. So, if the project gives us a positive NPV, we will say that okay, let us select this project. There is nothing to be compared with other projects. Okay. So, even if we are, let us say, using IRR, if IRR is greater than my desired IRR, I will say okay, let us select this project. Okay. So, both NPV and IRR will lead to the same accept reject decision. Okay. If cash flows are discounted, let us say at rate K1 here. Okay. So, for if my K1 is the rate of discount, I can see that my NPV is positive, I will select that project, I will accept that project. From IRR also, IRR is this much, which is greater than the desired IRR, I will accept this project. If my expected discount rate is K2, so then I will see okay, at K2 this project is giving me negative NPV, and let us not select this project based on the criteria of NPV. Okay. So, this has to be K2, it will be rejected, and based on IRR also, if I will figure out that okay, my expected rate of return is K2 and my IRR for this project is less than K2. So, based on IRR criteria also the project will be rejected. So, the decision is same whether I am using NPV or I am using IRR. However, this when we move away from the independent project to the mutually exclusive project, then there might be conflicting decision at times. So, mutually exclusive project, as we discussed earlier, are the projects where only one option can be selected, right. For example, that could be any reason, there could be let us say limitation of fund. So, I have limited fund and I can only fund just one particular project, okay. Or the nature of project itself could be mutually exclusive, okay. So, then which project to select and which not to select, that for decision making of that, let us take an example, let us see this with an example. So, we have two different projects, project A and project B. The initial investment in project A is let us say 50 lakh rupees and in project B is 150 lakh rupees, and this is my net inflow, the cash at the end of year 1, 2 and 3 from the two projects. Now, for these two projects, if I calculate net present value at certain discount rate, let us assume my discount rate is 10%. So, at 10% discount rate, the net present value of the projects are like this. So, project A is leading NPV of around 13.58 lakh rupees, while project B is leading a NPV of around let us say 15.6 lakh rupees. So, project B is giving me the higher NPV value, NPV of project B is greater than NPV of project A. So, I should choose a higher NPV project, so I should choose project B. But if we take the IRR criteria, okay, if we estimate the IRR for these projects, so IRR for project A turns out to be 24.47% and IRR for project B turns out to be 15.33%. So, here I see that return on project A or IRR of project A is higher as compared to IRR of project B, and this tells me that I should be going for project A. I should prefer project A over project B. Now, these two approaches giving me the conflicting results. Okay. So, they do not rank the project same. NPV is ranking B preferable to A, whereas IRR is ranking A preferable to B based on the NPV and IRR value. Now, NPV IRR calculation are the similar as we did earlier. So, I am not going into the detail of how we calculate NPV and IRR again. The question is which one to choose now. Okay. Now, again if you see that this is my profile, okay, this is my profile for project B, this is my profile for project A. If I plot let us say NPV, and these are the IRR for project, this is project A and this one is the IRR for project B, right. Now, these projects are intersecting here. Okay. So, if I see that my desired discount rate or my desired rate of return is up to K0, up to this rate of return I am happy with. So, then my project B is giving me higher NPV as compared to project A, and I should choose project B. However, if my expected rate of return is higher than this value, higher than K0, okay, then or for beyond the discount rate K0, I see that my project A is giving me the higher net present value as opposed to the project B, and I should choose project A. Of course, beyond this, none of the project is good to basically invest on. So, my decision here or which project is a better option will depend on what kind of rate or what kind of discount rate I am applying or what kind of rate of return I am expecting on these projects. So, that is what basically will be looked upon. Such problem arises when there is in basically multiple cases, and one such case is when we have differences in the scale of investment. Now, you see the same projects, the project A and project B that we were considering, one has an initial investment of 50 lakh rupees while another has an initial investment of 150 lakh rupees. So, there is almost like 3 times higher investment in the project B. In order to see whether, because this project, if you see, if you compare project A, project B, we earlier see that we can choose project A and project B based on discount rates and all that, but if you take up it in a different way, let us say instead of choosing a mutually, because these are mutually exclusive projects, we have to either choose project A or choose project B, but here the investment in project B is much higher as opposed to investment in project A, and that in the difference in investment is 100 rupees 100 lakh. So, this 100 lakhs investment in project B, is it justified, because this is also giving you the net present value positive, okay, and we earlier see that up to certain discount rate we can go for choosing project B over project A. So, is this actually the further investment of 100 crore is justified? That we can see that let us consider that when we are choosing project B, we are choosing project A plus another project B minus A with this additional 100 crore investment. So, that means the choosing project B is actually equivalent to choosing project A plus another hypothetical project B minus A, because my investment, if you see my investment in A plus investment in B minus A is going to be my investment in B. So, since my investment in B is equal to basically carrying out 2 projects instead of just one, we can carry out the project A as well as carry out the project B, project B minus A. So, that in combination gives me this. So, now I have a flexibility of assessing whether these both are satisfying the criteria, or whether these both, whether this additional 100 lakh rupees investment that I am going to make if I am choosing project B, how is the return expected on this particular incremental investment. Okay. Because remember, this project B minus A is the incremental investment that is being made while choosing project B over project A. So, I should because I independently saw that okay, project A is fine, project B is also fine, project A is giving me higher return and good NPV value as well, but project B although giving little higher NPV value, but how it compares when I am actually on a scale of like when I am looking at the additional investment. So, that 100 lakh rupees or 1 crore rupees additional investment that is being made is giving me this return. So, this is nothing but a subtraction of B minus A. Okay. So, this is actually B minus A, similarly B minus A and similarly B minus A. So, now these are my returns, and if I discount these further by the let us say 10% discount rate. So, 1.1 to the power 1 and then 1.1 to the power 2 and 1.1 to the power 3. So, that is what I am getting, and IRR for this particular additional investment is 11.03%, whereas NPV is 2%. So, as we were discussing earlier, choosing project B is equivalent to choosing project A plus B minus A. Okay. So, at 10% discount rate, NPV of this project B minus A is also greater than 0. So, that indicates that the incremental investment that we are making is justified. So, in a project B, the incremental investment that we are making over project A, that is also justified, and that suggests that we should actually choose project B based on the NPV criteria. Now, this can be seen graphically as well here. So, we have now 3 lines here. This is the same earlier problem. So, we have already the project A blue line and project B orange line. So, now the green line added reflects the project B minus A. Now, you see that up to this, up to your this k value particularly, okay, or 11%, whatever IRR was coming for this 11%. So, up to this 11%, if my expected rate of return is less than this 11%, I should actually my incremental investment is justified. This is the incremental investment is giving me the positive cash flow, or the net present value is positive. So, I should basically be selecting this. However, if my discount rate is exceeding, is like greater than 11%, my expected discount rate or my expected return is greater than the IRR for this incremental capital is greater than 11%. So, that I see that my actually the incremental investment is giving me the negative net present value. So, beyond this point, I should not go for choosing a particular like choosing project B, rather I should choose project A, because whatever incremental investment I am making is giving me negative rate of return. So, this way one can actually make a decision how we can incorporate or how we can consider the additional investment options as well, or how we can choose the projects in case of particularly mutually exclusive projects which are with different degree of initial investment. Now, interestingly, if you see here, this analysis, the way we analyzed net present value of fairly easily for the incremental investment as well as for the 2 projects. If you recall our earlier discussions, the computation or the calculation of IRR is not that easy. It is an basically trial and error approach. IRR is a trial and error approach, and the decisions also that is being made based on the IRR may not truly, of course, like if we want to convert NPV to IRR, they are or if you want to convert it from one form to another, we can convert and we can accordingly justify our decisions as well, but it is far more easy and far more approachable to make a decision based on the NPV in these cases. Based on the NPV, we can actually realize, okay, this is the point, this is my, let us say based on NPV or NPV profile, we can say, or NPV at a desired rate. Okay. We just if we go back to the earlier slide, we see that the NPV at my 10% was positive even for project B minus A. So, it automatically tells us, okay, the additional investment that I am making is justified over here. Now, what if still I will get some IRR value, I will get some this value, but what if my NPV here is, let us say, coming minus 1.5 for example, let us say. Okay. if my NPV for the incremental this thing is coming minus 1.5, I automatically just based on my NPV can see, okay, no, this additional investment that is being made is not actually justified, okay, or the return on this additional investment being made, incremental investment is being made, is not giving the positive NPV value or at expected return. So, this investment is actually not justified. So, the decision making is rather more simple with NPV as compared to IRR, and that is why the net present value is more preferred in such scenarios for making decision over IRR. Just for individual projects estimation, or if we are having independent projects, then whatsoever technique we can we want to adopt is fine, but when basically for particularly comparing different projects or ranking projects, and those to the projects which are mutually exclusive nature because of whatsoever reason, it is better to go for net present value over IRR. Okay. We will take a few other cases where we will compare the net present value and IRR in the next class. We will end this here, and in the subsequently next session we will discuss a few more cases onto these ranking conflicts between NPV and IRR. Thank you.